Preparing for a Deloitte Technology interview? You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 20 key questions you're likely to face. For each question you'll see a sample answer followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. Tell me about a technology project you delivered from requirements through deployment. I led a customer reporting platform that replaced spreadsheet-based processes. I clarified requirements with business users, designed a React and .NET application, and used Azure SQL with role-based access. I divided delivery into short iterations, demonstrated working features weekly, and automated testing through the deployment pipeline. The solution reduced monthly preparation time by 60% and improved data accuracy. The biggest lesson was validating assumptions early, especially around security and reporting definitions. While answering, focus on the business problem, your specific responsibilities, architecture decisions, collaboration with stakeholders, delivery challenges, measurable outcomes, and lessons learned. Use a clear situation, action, and result structure. Question 2. How would you gather and manage requirements for a Deloitte client with unclear expectations? I would begin by identifying decision makers, end users, technical owners, and compliance stakeholders. Then I would run discovery sessions using process maps, examples, and targeted questions rather than accepting vague requests. I would document assumptions, prioritize requirements by business value and risk, and convert them into testable acceptance criteria. A lightweight prototype helps expose misunderstandings early. I would maintain traceability and revisit priorities regularly as the client learns more. Make sure to cover stakeholder mapping, discovery workshops, active listening, process documentation, prioritization, acceptance criteria, assumptions, traceability, and frequent validation through prototypes or demonstrations. Question 3. Explain how you would design a scalable cloud solution for an enterprise client. I would start with workload characteristics, regulatory needs, traffic patterns, and recovery objectives. For a scalable design, I would use stateless services behind a load balancer, manage databases with replication, asynchronous queues for spikes, and autoscaling based on meaningful metrics. Identity would follow least privilege, while encryption, logging, monitoring, and backup policies would be built in. I would compare cloud services against cost and operational complexity, not choose technology simply because it is fashionable. In your answer, talk about workload assessment, availability, elasticity, networking, identity, data storage, observability, disaster recovery, cost controls, and selecting managed services appropriately. Question 4. What is the difference between SQL joins, and when would you use each one? An inner join returns only rows matching in both tables, so I use it when incomplete relationships should be excluded. A left join keeps every row from the first table and fills missing matches with nulls, which is useful for finding customers without orders. Right and full joins are less common but represent the mirrored and combined cases. I always verify cardinality, because a many-to-many join can silently multiply rows and distort totals. Be sure to mention inner, left, right, and full joins, unmatched rows, null behavior, practical business examples, join conditions, indexing, and how incorrect joins can create duplicate results. Question 5. How would you investigate and optimize a slow SQL query in production? I would first capture the exact query, parameters, execution time, resource usage, and business impact. Using an execution plan, I would look for table scans, expensive joins, poor cardinality estimates, and missing or ineffective indexes. I might rewrite predicates, reduce selected columns, improve indexes, or archive cold data. I would test against realistic volumes, compare baseline metrics, and deploy cautiously. I would also check whether blocking or excessive application calls, rather than SQL itself, causes the slowdown. While answering, focus on reproducing the issue safely, examining execution plans, indexes, statistics, joins, filtering, query volume, locking, and measuring improvements before and after each change. Question 6. Describe object-oriented principles and explain where they helped in a real application. Object-oriented design groups behavior with the data it operates on. Encapsulation protects invariants, abstraction hides implementation details, polymorphism allows interchangeable behavior, and inheritance can share a genuine specialization relationship. In one payment service, I used an interface for payment providers and separate implementations for card and bank transfers. The service depended on that abstraction, making providers easy to test and replace. I prefer composition over deep inheritance because it reduces coupling and preserves flexibility. In your answer, talk about encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, composition, solid principles, maintainability, testability, and avoiding unnecessary class complexity. Question 7. How would you approach a coding problem when the requirements are incomplete? I would first restate the problem and ask about input size, ordering, duplicates, invalid values, and expected output. If answers were unavailable, I would state reasonable assumptions explicitly. Next, I would outline a simple solution, then improve it using the constraints. I would explain time and space complexity before coding, test normal and boundary cases, and narrate decisions clearly. This approach demonstrates both problem-solving ability and the communication needed in client-facing engineering. Make sure to cover clarifying questions, assumptions, examples, constraints, brute force, optimized strategy, complexity analysis, edge cases, testing, and communicating trade-offs while coding. Question 8. What is the difference between REST and SOAP, and how would you choose between them? REST is an architectural style that models resources through HTTP methods and commonly uses JSON, making it lightweight and convenient for web and mobile clients. SOAP is a protocol built around XML envelopes, formal contracts, and enterprise features such as WS security. I would choose REST for new, simple, high-volume APIs when flexibility matters. I would consider SOAP when integrating established enterprise systems that require strict contracts or existing security and transaction standards. Be sure to mention HTTP resources, verbs, statelessness, JSON, WSDL, XML, strict contracts, enterprise security, interoperability, performance, legacy integration, and the client's regulatory or operational constraints. Question 9. How would you secure an enterprise application handling sensitive client data? I would begin with threat modeling and data classification, then apply defense in depth. Authentication would use a trusted identity provider with MFA, while authorization would enforce least privilege and separation of duties. Data would be encrypted in transit and at rest, with secrets stored in a managed vault. I would validate inputs, patch dependencies, scan code and containers, and avoid sensitive values in logs. Finally, monitoring, retention policies, incident playbooks, and regular access reviews would support compliance. While answering, focus on threat modeling, identity, least privilege, encryption, secrets management, input validation, secure logging, vulnerability scanning, privacy controls, incident response, and compliance requirements. Question 10. Explain CI/CD and describe how you would implement it for a client project. CI/CD automates the path from a committed change to a tested and deployable release. I would use pull requests with peer review, build immutable artifacts, run unit, integration, security, and quality checks, then promote the same artifact through environments. Infrastructure would be defined as code, and production releases would use approvals, canary or blue-green techniques, and automated rollback. Pipeline metrics and post-deployment monitoring are essential because deployment success is not the same as user success. In your answer, talk about version control, automated builds, unit and integration tests, quality gates, artifact management, environment promotion, approvals, rollback, infrastructure as code, and deployment monitoring. Question 11. What is your approach to testing a new enterprise application? I use a risk-based test strategy rather than trying to test everything equally. Unit tests protect business logic, integration tests verify databases and external services, and API or end-to-end tests validate critical user journeys. I add performance, security, accessibility, and regression coverage according to impact and compliance needs. Tests should run automatically in the pipeline with controlled data and reliable environments. Exploratory testing remains valuable for usability and unexpected behaviors that scripts may miss. Make sure to cover risk-based testing, unit, integration, API, end-to-end, performance, security, accessibility, regression, test data, automation, and balancing coverage with delivery speed. Question 12. How would you handle a production incident affecting an important client? I would first assess impact, severity, affected services, and recent changes, then establish an incident lead and communication channel. The immediate goal is containment, which might mean rollback, disabling a feature, or routing traffic elsewhere. I would provide stakeholders with factual updates, time-based expectations, and known limitations. After recovery, I would preserve evidence, identify contributing factors through a blameless review, and track preventive actions such as tests, alerts, or architecture changes to completion. Be sure to mention incident severity, communication, triage, containment, rollback, evidence preservation, escalation, stakeholder updates, root cause analysis, corrective actions, and blameless learning. Question 13. How do you explain a complex technical recommendation to a non-technical client executive? I translate technology into outcomes the executive values, such as reduced processing time, lower risk, or faster market delivery. I present a few viable options with costs, benefits, risks, and implementation timelines, then make a clear recommendation tied to agreed criteria. I use simple diagrams and concrete examples, avoiding unexplained jargon. I pause for questions and confirm understanding by asking how the decision aligns with priorities. The goal is informed ownership, not technical persuasion. In your answer, talk about business outcomes, plain language, relevant visuals, options, costs, risks, assumptions, recommendation criteria, listening, and confirming understanding without overwhelming the audience. Question 14. Describe a time you disagreed with a technical decision and how you resolved it. On one project, a teammate proposed a synchronous integration that was simple but vulnerable to downstream delays. I first asked about the business requirement, then shared latency and failure scenarios rather than criticizing the proposal. We compared synchronous and queued designs against reliability, complexity, and delivery time. A small prototype showed that an asynchronous approach met the service level target. The team adopted it, and I documented the decision. Once aligned, I supported implementation wholeheartedly. While answering, focus on respectful challenge, evidence, trade-off analysis, stakeholder goals, experiments, decision ownership, compromise, and supporting the final choice after alignment. Question 15. How would you migrate a legacy application to the cloud without disrupting business operations? I would inventory dependencies, data flows, licensing, performance needs, and recovery objectives before selecting a strategy. Some components may be rehosted quickly, while others deserve replatforming or gradual refactoring. I would establish secure connectivity, synchronize data, test performance, and migrate a low-risk pilot first. A phased rollout with parallel validation, feature flags, monitoring, and a rollback plan limits disruption. I would modernize where the business case justifies it, rather than rewriting everything automatically. Make sure to cover discovery, dependency mapping, migration strategies, data synchronization, security, pilot workloads, phased rollout, rollback, observability, stakeholder communication, and modernization decisions. Question 16. What are microservices, and when would you avoid using them? Microservices split a system into independently deployable services aligned with business capabilities. They can improve team autonomy, scaling flexibility, and fault isolation, but introduce network latency, distributed tracing, deployment complexity, and difficult data consistency. I would avoid them for a small product, a single team, or an immature delivery environment where a modular monolith provides cleaner simplicity. I would adopt microservices when boundaries, ownership, scaling needs, and operational capabilities justify their cost. In your answer, talk about independent deployment, bounded contexts, ownership, APIs, data consistency, observability, operational overhead, team maturity, modular monoliths, and organizational boundaries. Question 17. How would you design an API for reliability and maintainability? I would model clear resources and use consistent HTTP methods, status codes, error formats, and validation rules. For large collections, I would provide pagination and filtering. For retried writes, I would support idempotency keys where appropriate. Authentication and authorization would be explicit, with rate limits protecting shared capacity. I would document the contract using OpenAPI, version changes carefully, and publish latency, error, and usage metrics. Compatibility matters more than clever endpoint design, especially for long-lived client integrations. Be sure to mention resource modeling, consistent naming, validation, status codes, versioning, idempotency, pagination, authentication, rate limiting, documentation, observability, and backward compatibility. Question 18. How do you prioritize competing technical and business requirements? I make prioritization explicit by comparing customer value, urgency, risk reduction, regulatory necessity, dependencies, and delivery effort. I may use a weighted scoring model, but I validate the result with stakeholders because numbers do not replace judgment. Compliance and safety constraints are treated as non-negotiable. I explain what will not be done and why, then revisit priorities as usage data or new risks emerge. This creates transparency and protects the team from constantly changing direction. While answering, focus on value, urgency, risk, dependencies, effort, regulatory obligations, stakeholder alignment, transparent scoring, trade-off communication, and revisiting priorities as evidence changes. Question 19. What would you do if a client requested a solution that was technically risky or non-compliant? I would clarify the underlying business outcome instead of rejecting the request immediately. Then I would assess the technical, security, privacy, and regulatory risks, quantify likely consequences, and explain them in business terms. I would involve appropriate specialists and offer alternatives that preserve the outcome with safer controls or a phased approach. If the risk remained unacceptable, I would escalate through governance channels and document the decision. Client service includes protecting the client from avoidable harm. In your answer, talk about understanding intent, identifying risks, explaining consequences, consulting security or legal specialists, proposing safer alternatives, documenting decisions, and escalating appropriately. Question 20. Why do you want to work in Deloitte's technology consulting environment? I am interested in Deloitte because technology work is connected directly to business transformation and measurable client outcomes. The consulting environment would expose me to different industries, architectures, and stakeholder perspectives while challenging me to communicate clearly. My experience delivering applications, improving engineering practices, and collaborating across functions fits that model. I also value continuous learning, especially across cloud, data, and responsible technology. I would bring ownership, adaptability, and a practical focus on sustainable results. Be sure to mention client impact, varied industries, teamwork, continuous learning, technology transformation, communication, adaptability, and how your experience supports Deloitte's consulting and delivery expectations. If you are still with us, congratulations. You are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.